Hi YouTube, Darth here. While we're all feeling a bit sentimental for older Battlefield titles, I had a thought occur to me last week. Was Battlelog, the web-based Battlefield browser, better than the in-game server browser in Battlefield 1 and soon-to-be Battlefield 5? I asked this very question of people who follow me on Twitter, and by the way, if you're not doing so already, the link is in the description. I'm quite active there even when I'm not making videos. But nonetheless, I asked Battlefield question, do you prefer Battlelog or an in-game browser? Well, Twitter polls, being absolutely the most scientific and irrefutable evidence in the universe, seem to indicate that the vast majority of Battlefield players, at least in my reach, seem to prefer Battlelog. About 62 to 38% being the final total, though initial vote counts had Battlelog much higher. I'd initially asked this question because I was curious where we were in the love-hate cycle of previous Battlefield games. It seems we are in the phase of Battlelog was better and in-game browser is the worst. I find this really weird, as I could swear that if we asked this question 4 years ago, the answer would have been the exact opposite. I seem to recall tons of players lobbying, nay demanding, that DICE replace Battlelog with an in-game server browser. Oh, how everything was better in older Battlefields where we had the server browser! Well, my fellow Battlefield players, this is a textbook Golden Age thinking in action. Because DICE did exactly what we asked for. DICE replaced the web browser with an in-game browser, and we're right back to where we were before. Players are saying that the in-game browser is worse and that Battlelog was better in a lot of ways. So I wanted to look at the virtues and vices of Battlelog and the in-game browser, and maybe we could come to some kind of consensus in the comments later. Or maybe it's just the great circle of internet jerking come round once again. Part of me wonders if all the love for Battlelog has something to do with folks liking Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 just playing more than Battlefield 1. You're probably going to associate some pleasing memories with all the otherwise beneficial features in your favorite game. If you liked Battlefield 3 and 4 and didn't like Battlefield 1, I'm guessing that you probably don't have a favorable opinion of in-game server browsing versus Battlelog. And before I started this video, I was in the same boat. So talking about Battlelog some, Battlelog was initially introduced with Battlefield 3, and I can't say that I was super stoked at the time. I initially got the game for free, and I couldn't understand why I had to launch a web browser to play a game. As a PC gamer, it was extremely confusing and irritating for me to have to both install Origin and then use a completely different portal to play the multiplayer game. Why couldn't I just do what I was used to with Battlefield and start the game, or launch it from Origin like one would launch a game from Steam? For a first session, it really rubs you the wrong way because it's simply not built for ease of player use, and I can think of very few other games that launch their multiplayer that way, at least ones that don't belong on Facebook. But if you could get past the initial learning curve and just plain weirdness of the feature, it did have a number of advantages over previous Battlefield titles. For one, you could see all your information in one spot. You could see how your character stats lined up, what guns and weapons you hadn't unlocked, or how your vehicle stats were, and much more. This was a very large amount of information that was both useful and informative for players. I know it certainly spurred me on to become a better player when I'd load up and see my mediocre stats for the first couple of dozen hours of Battlefield 3. I used to have a 3.5 KD in Counter-Strike, why was I so bad at Battlefield 3? Well, Battlelog gave me the forensic evidence to find out why. It was certainly a great addition for helping you track your own progress, and there were lots of other sites that tagged along on the API like BF3stats.com. BF3stats.com allowed players to get even more insight and track their progress on a global level. Other websites helped you evaluate if a player was likely to be a cheater or not. We had an unprecedented amount of features dropped in our laps. It was like Battlefield Christmas. Combined with an in-browser VoIP, platoon, and messaging system, we had some oddly redundant systems with what Origin was trying to do. It's not surprising that those features have slowly gone away. It's not that we don't want them still, it's just that EA seems to want them to be part of a fully featured Origin Friends system. Maybe they'll come back sometime in the future, who knows. Anyways, with Battlefield 4, we got even more features for Battlelog, the ability to see games in progress, battle reports, and even more statistical tracking information. You could even change your loadouts and customizations for each individual weapon in the game. It really felt like a fleshed out Battlefield interface, even if it was all web-based. Something that really isn't Battlelog's doing is the Better Battlelog add-on. This extra extensibility of the basic framework of Battlelog made it a really feature-rich tool. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Better Battlelog and you're still using Battlelog, you should definitely check it out. It's extremely useful for saving server filters that you like and provides a lot of extra useful information on your stats pages. There's probably a ton of other features that I'm not familiar with or I'm forgetting, but that's pretty much the bulk of what I use it for. One detraction I haven't mentioned about Battlelog is the inherent slowness and problems that come with it. It has to coordinate with Origin, your game, the server, all while reserving and loading you in. It's frequently slow while the game has to load, had tons of problems at launch with consistency, and even now has the occasional connection issues trying to line all of that up. It's really a suboptimal experience for just trying to jump into a game as quickly as possible. So Battlelog had its time, and a lot of people called for its replacement after Battlefield 3, 4, and Hardline. It's not surprising that when EA stepped away from having third-party server providers that they also stepped away from having third-party interface tools. Seems like win-win when you can do what your players keep asking you for and bring things in-house. Or does it? So now let's talk about the in-game server browser, and I'm going to have to talk primarily about the server browser in Battlefield 1. I realize that Battlefront 1 and 2 have some matchmaking components to them, but I think the comparison is apple to oranges in the case of the Battlefield franchise. A lot of the primary complaints I hear about the in-game server browser has to do with the lack of feature parity. Honestly, Battlefield 1 did not launch with nearly as robust of a server browser and in-game stats system as it has now. That's a stark difference from Battlefield 3 and 4, where we were just used to more. There's a lot in the Battlefield 1 browser that shares commonality with Battlelog. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find things in Battlelog that aren't in Battlefield 1's in-game UI now. It seems like DICE has done some improvement over the last few years and months. Most of the missing functionality between the two now lives in the realm of improvements that better Battlelog made. For example, I like adding servers to my radar in Battlefield 4 when they're run with janky admin mods. I can't call out bad servers in the Battlefield 1 browser, or at least I'm not familiar with that if it is a feature. I do find the number of clicks inside Battlefield 1's in-game browser to be substantially higher and slightly more peevish. It's nice to see all my options at a glance, which Battlefield 1 unfortunately does not let you really do. But as far as features go, I can generally pare the options down to what I would have found in Battlefield 3 and 4's Battlelog. I'd also argue that the in-game server browser is going to just be plain faster in every circumstance. You don't have to unload and load the game every time you switch servers. Alternatively, if you're one of those folks that alt-tab while in a game to find a new server in Battlefield 4, hats off to you. But as far as speed goes in Battlefield 1, you don't have to wait for Origin to load and connect. There are no strange plugins that you have to download to make the game work. You don't have to worry about what browser you're using. It just works right out of the box, though mileage may vary. Now, some issues I do see with the in-game browser are that there's no messaging outside of Origin. Now that may be true of Battlefield 1, but it has been changed in Battlefield 5, where there is a messaging system not unlike Overwatch's party messaging system, with the exception of no horrible global chat. Seriously, who thought that was a good idea in Overwatch, and why do I keep getting placed in it by default? I can't stand it. Also, a detraction from the in-game browsing system is that it heavily pushes players towards using the automatic matchmaking system. This punishes communities that are renting servers, as players that use matchmaking will generally only land on servers with official settings. And why would you rent a server if you're just going to run the basic game? That's DICE and EA's job you're doing for them. If you want to run more tickets, well, you're probably out of luck, and for those players that are using the server browser, they'll almost never want to join an empty server. So good luck getting your server started in the first place. Additionally, I have a personal grudge for the way that Battlefield 1 uses the outdated skill system for matchmaking players into a match. It leads to really poor outcome of teams. Overall though, Battlefield 1's in-game server browser has near feature parity with Battlelog, save for the better Battlelog features. I think it's come a good way since launch, and while it's not perfect, the lead-ups certainly keep players thinking about options other than their default server list. The suggestion system certainly keeps the game fresh. But is Battlelog better than the in-game server browser? When Battlefield 3 launched, I'd have said absolutely not. By the time Battlefield 4 launched, I was pretty well sold on Battlelog and wouldn't imagine going back. When we got Battlefield 1, my prejudice got the best of me. I openly pined for the days of Battlelog and couldn't see any advantages in the new system. So I think the lesson here is that I honestly don't care as long as whatever you're doing has feature parity with whatever we were using before. And is reliable, and also bonus points for not feeling weird. And it might be nice if you thought of community features whatsoever at launch. But what do you folks think? Which is your favorite, Battlelog or the in-game browser? Let me know in the comments below. That's it for this video about Battlelog versus the in-game browser. Be sure to force choke that like button before you go, and if you're new around here, check out the content on my channel and please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.